Hey guys, so I just want to make a quick video that will show you how to both create a project in Eclipse and then also, I guess, do everything that you would need to know in order to complete project one, which is really all about just printing to the console. Okay, so if you're using Ripple instead of Eclipse because you haven't been able to install Eclipse yet, everything's going to be the same after you've created the project, right? So the ideas and the concepts are still the same. It's just the first couple of steps will be a little bit different. All right, so the first thing we obviously need to do in Eclipse is create a project. So the way you do that, well, there's a couple ways to do it. For me, I think the easiest way is just to simply right-click over in the Project Explorer on the left-hand side. All right, so once you've done that, I'm going to say New Project. Oops, I'm going to take that back. I'm going to say New Java Project. Oh, it's not an option, is it? So let me go up here instead. So File, New, Java Project. So that's the other way. It usually should say, give you that option in the left-hand window as well. I'm not sure why it didn't. But again, you can just always go up to File, New, Java Project. Okay. So now that I'm here, I'm going to create my project. I'm going to call it Project 1. Something that's really important is you want to make sure that you choose Java SE 1.8. I think you'll have some issues with packages if you use the default version of Java, which is Java 13. So again, make sure you select Java 1.8 from this drop-down window and then hit finish. Okay, so this is what we just did is we created the project. Nothing more really than that. We just created the project. If you expand it, you should see two sub-items. The first is just a bunch of libraries for the Java runtime. The other is an SRC folder. So the SRC folder is where we're going to put our code for our project. So what I usually do is, again, just right-click on that SRC folder, right-click on that SRC folder, and go to New and Class. And then I'm going to type in Project 1 Main. Now, I mean, you can name this pretty much anything that you want. It makes sense for it to be descriptive. You can't have spaces. All right, you cannot have spaces in your name. So if I did something like this, Project space 1 space main, it won't work. And what you should do is use what's known as camel casing, right? Where you'll notice, like I have multiple words crunched together, so I capitalize the first letter in each word. All right, after that, check the public static void main checkbox and then hit finish. And this is what you should get. All right, so here we go. I've got my class. We've said many times in class that my block of code, in this case the class, starts with an opening curly brace and ends with a closing curly brace, right? So everything in between these two braces is my main class, and conveniently, let me just close this so they don't keep popping up. Okay, conveniently, if you mouse over that closing brace, you can see it shows you what's inside of this class, or in between these two braces, the block of code, right? So that's the first outer set, right? The second, I guess, block of code is our main method. So whenever a Java program runs, whenever you run a Java program, Java always looks for a method with this exact, I'm going to call it a signature. That's a computer science term, which basically just defines how you identify a method, which is something we'll get into much later, right? But it's got to look exactly like this: public static void main string args. We'll talk about what that is much later. But for right now, just understand you got to type your code inside of this method, otherwise it won't run. Now, where does this method start? Again, it starts at this opening brace. Where does it end? It ends at that closing brace, right? And again, if I mouse over that closing brace, you can see that it highlights that block of code. Now, right now, there's just one item inside of this main method. It says it's a comment. It's just saying basically, this is auto-generated, but what we're going to do is we're going to insert our code here instead. So I'm going to say system.out.println. So system.out.println is how we print anything to our console, right? It's how we output stuff from our program. So as we've also mentioned in class, there are very strict syntax rules in Java, right? If I was to say not capitalize that S, it's not going to work. If I was to capitalize the P, it's not going to work, right? If I was to put a random period right there, it's not going to work. It has to look exactly like this, system.out.println, and it has to end with a semicolon, all right? Now, basically the idea is anything that goes between those two parentheses is what's going to be printed to the console. Now, for right now, we're always going to also include quotes. We'll later on see like why sometimes you don't include those quotes, but for right now, I think it's just good to know, or sufficient to just know, hey, just put quotes. And everything, again, that we want to print needs to go in quotes. Now, I'm going to show you what I would do. My initials are T, Thomas, J, and then S for, of course, swope, right? So, I mean, basically, when you write something to the console, you always do it row at a time, right? So if I want my T, my J, and my S to all go across the screen or across the console, then I have to print them parts, each line of my initial on its own row, right? I'm not going to do my whole initials, right? But there it is. Hey, here's a quick a secret here. There's a shortcut for doing system.out.println. If I do SYSO and then hit, oh boy, I always forget if it's control or command. I'm going to try control first. There we go. Control space, right? So I typed SYSO and then I hit control space. It replaces it with system.out.println. Pretty cool, right? All right, so anyway, I would continue, right? And you'll notice, again, very particular about syntax, ending with a semicolon, putting what I want to print in between quotes. I've got everything inside of parentheses after my system.out.println. All those things are super important. Here's something that's not a syntax rule, but is just as important. Please look at how nicely my code is lined up, right? So I'm going to add just a bunch of other SYs, system.out.printlns. Okay, so there's one. And then I'm just going to copy and paste and put a couple more in. Oops. Okay, so listen, the idea is indenting in programming indicates what your code is inside of, what block of code your code is inside of. So right here, look, all of my system.out.printlns are on their own line. They're all lined up perfectly. This is not a syntax rule, but this is a convention that I will expect you to follow, right? Because it's good coding practice. It's just what every coder has agreed to follow, right? If you want to be a part of the, coding community or whatever you'd say, you want your code to be well received and read, you need to follow these conventions, right? So I'll often see students turn in work that looks something like this, right? Where they've just got stuff all over the place, right? Look how messy this is. This makes me a little sick to my stomach, right? It's just wrong, okay? So we're not going to do that, right? We're going to make a point of always, always, always having one command per line, right? So I should never have more than one command on a line. That's the first thing. Always lined up so that I can see that, this system.out.println is inside of that system.println. Now, if you mess it up, it's easy to fix. You can just simply do Command A, Command I, and there it is, right? Look how that cleaned it up for me. All right, last thing I'll say is we always want our closing brace to line up with and close the same, structure that it opened. I don't think I said that well, so let me try again. All right, so here's my public static void main, right? It opens or starts with that curly brace right there. It ends with this curly brace right here, right? So this curly brace is what? Horizontally, vertically? I don't know. It lines up with, it's indented just as far as the main method that it's closing. Look, here's this curly brace. What does it close? I mean, it's so obvious just from looking at it that it closes what? The class, right? Again, that's not a syntax rule. Like I could put it there and I could put that there and it still works, but it's kind of ugly, right? It makes me sick to see, and after you get more experience as a programmer, you'll feel the same way if you see other students writing code that's not properly formatted. It just turns your stomach a little bit. So Anyway, a couple things, first of all, obviously syntax rules, things that you need to be able to do in order to write code that's going to compile. And then the other pieces are just some common practices that we have all agreed to follow. So, I mean, once you're done, you just hit the run and you can see that it's going to print to the console now. For me, it just has my T, my J, and the S, and then it did put a bunch of, these are just empty print lines, so it just put a bunch of like return characters down there. It doesn't look like much. You're going to give me your full initials, right? And then some sort of picture below that. So I hope that helps. I'm going to post this right now, and yep, I'll catch you all next week.